Hi, my name is Ray Peachey. I'm the Substance Abuse Prevention Coordinator for the town of Westford, working with the Health Department. And this is Westford Health Beat. I'm here with Seth Lajoie, who is the Environmental Services Manager for the Health Department. And we're going to talk to Seth a little bit about the environmental services and what he does within the town. So Seth, welcome. Thank you for coming.
Well, thanks for having me.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and you know, what you've been doing here?
Okay, well, I've been working for the town for 2 years now in the capacity of Environmental Services Manager. And basically there's a lot to do with Title V in this town, and that really is what my main background has been. You know, I went to the University of Massachusetts at Amherst, and I actually studied soil science, plant and soil sciences. Had absolutely no idea what I was ever going to do with that.
That was a question I was going to ask you, but okay.
It seemed like a great idea at the time. You know, I actually initially went in, believe it or not, as a hotel, restaurant, and travel administration major, and quickly realized that I really liked the sciences because at UMass they make you take a whole bunch of general education courses, and one of the things that I had taken was a turf management course because I figured, well, what the heck, it's you know, grass and all this stuff, and part of that was an introduction to the soil science, and I really enjoyed the soils aspect of it. So I changed my major to that and ended up graduating with a degree in plant and soil sciences with a major concentration in soil science. And started. At the time I was dating a girl, and she was finishing up grad school. So I had to stick around, kind of in that area of Western Massachusetts, which everybody loves living out in Amherst, Massachusetts, so it was kind of difficult to find a job, but I actually managed to find a job working at a grass seed and fertilizer company doing custom fertilizer application.
Okay.
And I did that for about 1.5 years, and then after that I put my resume out to a bunch of engineering companies, and one of the engineering companies that I put my resume out to was actually a local one here that was David Ross Associates in Ayer, and I ended up working there for about 5 years, and kind of cut my teeth at that point. I came in there doing all of their soil testing. They wanted me to do soil evaluations and PERT tests, and so I got to learn that aspect of it, which I found out real quick was about as exciting as watching grass grow. But it definitely you know, got me into the business, and it got me you know, doing something that I actually studied in college, which was kind of nice, doing the groundwater determinations and digging PERT tests, and I did a lot of that. You know, when you're 20-something-year-old kid, and you got a strong back, and you can carry a bunch of water, and you can dig a bunch of holes. Yeah, that's really so. I started off there, and you know, over the years, you know, working at that engineering firm, they started me off just doing the soil testing, and then they realized that I had an aptitude for actually doing design work, and they taught me how to design a septic plan, which is something that I found out just working in the industry is something that they don't teach at school. You know, they just don't really teach that at UMass. They don't teach it in engineering school. It's something that you kind of have to learn on the fly.
That's different. You would think that they wouldn't.
Well, you would think in Massachusetts in particular that that there would be specific courses that were designed to kind of get people, you know, geared up towards actually doing the things that they need to do in the industry. But you know, I realize that it's a highly specialized sort of thing, and you really I'm one of those people that the best way to learn how to do things is actually doing it. So
I'm with you on that.
It was really a good thing that I was able to be in an environment that really fostered that, and allowed me to kind of play towards what my strengths were,
Right.
which was, the spatial relationships, and it's really nice because it kind of took all of the soil science and everything that I had learned at UMass and kind of showed me that there is a real practical application for this, and there's a real need for it. I mean, it's basically people don't stop going to the bathroom and people don't stop dying. So it's the Title V guys and the undertakers are always going to have a job, doing something anyway, so that's really how I cut my teeth in the industry, and I did that did it for private industry for almost 20 years. I actually had my own company for about 11 years of that. So it really, I have a base of knowledge that's not exactly what a lot of people in public service are used to having. I've worked both sides of the coin, which really has allowed me to I just see things a little bit differently, I think, than a lot of people that are in similar positions to what I had.
Not just black and white. You've been there.
Yeah. There are some real, there are some things that are very black and white. Like if you have a situation where there is a brand new lot and somebody wants to build a brand new house, you really have to stick with the letter of the law, because I mean Title V is very specific as to what you can do and what you can't do. But Title V really wasn't a thing until the 70s. So there was Article 11 before that, which was the 60s, and then in 1978 there was Title V came into play. Okay. So as you know, there's an awful lot of houses in Massachusetts that were built prior to 1978, and most of those were on undersized, really tiny lots. So there was an immediate. They knew immediately when they were writing these regulations that they needed to, basically give a little leeway to these situations where you have these homes that have been there for decades and need a new septic system, but you can't exactly fit it on the lot, so that they developed this thing called maximum feasible compliance, which is something that designers will take full advantage of. There's actually a section in Title V that deals specifically with maximum feasible compliance for existing systems.
Okay, good. Well, who does Title V affect in Westford?
Title V affects absolutely everybody in Westford, because there's no public sewer anywhere in town here. Okay. So there's the majority of the people in town are on their own private septic systems, and there are some large systems and shared systems as well that people deal with in the town of Westford. But it's absolutely an integral part of Westford as a community. You just can't get away from it.
Right.
And more likely than not, the people that are watching this are going, oh yeah, I had to deal with that at one point or another. Correct. Either when they were buying it or when they were selling it, or exactly. Both at that point. It can be it can be a really difficult thing for people to have to go through, and I get that. We try to make that process as easy as possible for the citizens of Westford, because it's there are things that we can do to help the process, take the sting off of it a little bit.
Now, what's the purpose of a Title V review?
The purpose of reviewing a Title V plan really is to make sure that the plan is in compliance with Title V and also with the town of Westford's Board of Health regulations. We have our own regulations that are over and above the requirements of Title V. But really, the purpose of the plan review is to make sure that whatever system goes into a specific location is going to be is going to protect the public health to the maximum extent possible. You know, we really want to do the best job we can in this community to protect in particular the groundwater, because groundwater, like the drinking water supply in town is basically all wells. So even if you're on municipal water in the town of Westford, that municipal water originates from a well, from under the ground. So as you know, you've got a septic system and you're putting waste into the ground. You want to make sure that it's not adversely affecting the water that we're drinking. So it's really important to make sure that the designs that are coming in are in compliance with the provisions of Title V in terms of groundwater offset, and in terms of you know, the make sure that the systems are sized appropriately, make sure that they're, you know, that there are the appropriate offsets to surface waters, which can obviously impact groundwater ultimately. So it really is. It's probably the most important thing is to get it right from the get-go, get it right from the start, and make sure that you know, that way an installer can come in and basically it's not the installer's job to find deficiencies in a plan. Now, most of them out there can look at a plan and be like, well, this is, you know, you can actually point out deficiencies on the plan because they've done enough of these things, but it's not their job to do that. It's their job to take that plan and take it from this two-dimensional piece of paper and put it into the ground, and make sure that it's operating, you know, appropriately. And that all starts with, first off, the designers making sure that they know the regulations in town, and make sure that they know the Title V regulations. And then we're just kind of like that next step to make sure that everything is done within those codes, and is going to protect the public health and safety.
And I know that, you know, you'll have somebody come in and says that, you know, I'm going to install, and I hear Laurie saying, are you permitted to install in Westford? So everybody has to at least take not only a state license. Do they need a state license or not? They just need a local license to install permit?
Every municipality has their own permitting, their own licensing. So in order to install in Westford, you need to get, if you're an installer, you need to receive basically a permit to install, or a license to install in our town.
And that'll allow you to install once you do it. What do you get, once a year maybe? Or?
It's an annual renewal on it. So you know what this does is you see a lot of the same guys that are coming in and doing work in town, because you know most of them are local, and they don't want to go stray too far from their own backyards, because the further out you go, the further away you go from where your home base of operation is, the less money you're going to make, because there's more cost in trucking, there's more, you've got to bring all your equipment out to a site. So it's like you really deal with a lot of the same people, which is really nice from a permitting standpoint as well, because they understand what you're looking for. They understand what the inspectors are looking for. They understand how they're supposed to be doing these things. They know when to call. You know, and that's not to say that somebody who's coming in from outside of town would not do a sufficient job or a good job. It's just to say that the guys who have been working in town for long periods of time, we all know each other, and we all know how
and what you want.
We all know how to work with each other. We all get along nice. So try to anyway.
Yeah. All right. What would you say if you had to? What would you think the cost is if you had to replace your system?
Well, the cost of replacing a system is completely dependent upon, you know, factors on the ground. So what you end up having is you know, if you're on a site that is it's a little bit counterintuitive when you think about it. If you have a site that's on the water that's a little tiny postage stamp lot, you would think, oh, well, it's going to be a small system. It's not a huge cost. It's actually the exact opposite. Because when you have limited space and you have you know, offsets to surface waters and stuff like that, there can be, sometimes you need advanced treatments, treatment units. Sometimes you need, they're almost like small package wastewater treatment plants for individual homes, and that can really add to the cost. But I would say that for the most part in town here, you know, if you're on a lot that has some land area, the majority of the soils in town here are very sandy, which is actually really good for everyone in town that has to do one of these things, because it means that the faster the perk rate, all right, the smaller the system, and the more likely it is that it's going to be in the ground as opposed to a mounded system. The mounded systems are really where you start to add a lot of cost to them, because you can have components such as, you know, a pump chamber at that point, which then, you know, goes gravity feed from a septic tank, then gravity feed into the pump chamber, and then the pump actually lifts it up into the leach field. Okay. So it's an overall, you know, you've got a cost, you've got an extra tank, you've got a pump, you've got a mechanical component that is going to fail at some point. Yep. So the maintenance costs on them are a little bit more. The overall cost is a little bit more, because if you have, you know, you're required to have a 4-foot groundwater separation in the Commonwealth here. If you're upgrading a septic system, you can actually reduce that to a 3-foot groundwater separation. And so if you're in a situation where you have a raised septic system, and you're an existing home, by your engineer simply asking for a 3-foot groundwater separation as opposed to going the full 4-foot groundwater separation, is actually going to save you somewhere around $2,000. Okay. So I would say that on average, though, in town here, probably the average cost is somewhere around $20,000 to $25,000. And if you are in a situation where you need to upgrade your septic system, I would say that would be a very good figure to have in the back of your mind, just in terms of budgeting and trying to figure out, you know, where you're going to be at the end of the process in terms of your money.
And it can go higher, and it could possibly go lower.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, it's, you know,
better chance of it going higher than lower.
Better, always a better chance of it going higher than lower. Yeah. But I can tell you straight up, when people used to ask me, well, how much do you think this is going to cost me? I'd be like, well, it could be anywhere from $8,000 to $70,000, and they're like, that doesn't really help all that much. But that really is. It really depends on the parameters that are kind of offered up.
How are our regulations compared to the ones around us or the ones you've worked for? I mean, are they all pretty similar?
They all are relatively similar. I mean, we actually recently revamped our regulations in town here to kind of be more in line with what the state regulations are. But for the most part, you know, the regulations our local regulations are in line with local regulations in the area. Okay. You know, so we don't really require that much over and above, you know, Title V in town here. In particular, especially for upgrades. So if you've got an existing home, I mean, we are going to do everything in our power that we can to help that situation, and to make sure that you get a system that's being upgraded in accordance with state regulation that's going to protect Westford's groundwater, and isn't going to completely be detrimental to the homeowner. You know,
now, what does the state? What does the state? How do they play into our regs and stuff?
The state actually has baseline regulations, which is Title V. So you have You have specified groundwater offsets in Title V. You have specified flow rates depending on if it's a business or if it's a home, a residential home. So the state really does come into play with those baseline regulations. They say, but there's a section in Title V that says these are our baseline regulations. If you want to go, over and above these regulations, you can make them more restrictive, but you can't make them less restrictive. Right. So, and we also have to be very, very cognizant of what the potential legal pitfalls are for going too far over and above what Title V is, because a lot of times was my experience when Title V first came out. Well, the new Title V in 1995, that a lot of towns would actually use that provision in Title V to kind of backdoor the zoning regulations, and just so kind of to make it so that lots in their town couldn't be developed by things like one example would be saying, okay, the state requires that you have a maximum percolation rate of 30 minutes per inch. Well, in our town, we're going to make it more restrictive. And we're going to say, okay, we've got a maximum percolation rate of 15 minutes per inch. Well, if you're in a town that's all predominantly clay soils, and you've got every single perk rate is going at 28 minutes an inch, then you've essentially said you can't develop any lot in our town, regardless of size, regardless of, and that was kind of the norm for a long period of time until some of these communities started getting sued. Okay. And the courts were like, well, is there any scientific evidence to back up that this is better somehow than sizing the system appropriately? Okay. They could not come up with that justification, and therefore those regulations were thrown out. So, I've seen that in many communities that I've worked in over the years. Yeah. And so when I came into Westford as a regulator, and I was charged with rewriting some of the regulations that we have, I was looking at it from that standpoint. Okay. I was looking at it from the standpoint of how could we justify, these things being that much more restrictive than what Title V is. And so I mean, there's a real balancing act there that you have to play.
Okay. And we've talked basically about the inspection process, and I know when we had Ray Dick in here, she talked a little bit, but just go. How do you know that your septic is starting to, or how can you catch it early, or rather than sink into it when you go out your backyard?
One of the things that you want to do is you want to, first off, you want to get your system pumped regularly. Mm-hmm. And I lived in a community where I had where I was on city sewer. Okay, and that city sewer, the water and sewer bill was somewhere around $1,500 a year. Okay. In Westford, you might have a water bill, but you don't have a sewer bill because there's no city sewer. Right. So if you look at the cost of getting your septic tank pumped, which is somewhere around $300, that to me, first off, it's way less than what a sewer bill is. And second of all, it's super cheap insurance to make sure that your system is going to function for as long as it possibly can. So,
so don't go cheap on it.
Don't go cheap on it, exactly. Don't go cheap on it. But the way that one of the ways that you can tell if your system is failing or beginning to have problems is through that regular pumping schedule. Because what happens is a a guy who's pumping the tank is going to come out and is going to pump out your 1,000-gallon or 1,500-gallon septic tank. And if there's anything flowing back from the leach field, so once he gets to the bottom of that and he sees the outlet side, if there's water coming into the septic tank at that point, it means that there's a hydraulic load in the leach field, which means that the leach field is clogged. It's having a hard time draining into the ground.
Okay.
So if you've got a 1,000-gallon tank and he's pumping 1,200 gallons, you probably have a problem somewhere, either in the leach field or there might be there might well be a leak in the tank if it's installed in groundwater. I've seen that before too. But that's a good way to kind of keep up with it. And another indicator of whether or not your system is failing is if you see a nice rectangle in the middle of summer, that's beautiful green lawn, growing up like totally lush and everything else is dead, you probably have a clogged leach field because that grass is getting absolutely every nutrient it needs on the planet, and it is just loving life.
Yeah. So that stuff's not going anywhere. It's
not going anywhere. It's just sitting
staying right there.
Yep.
Oh, okay. That's good. We've got a couple of minutes. What else do you do? You know?
Well, you know, I work with the Healthy Lakes and Ponds committee here in town, and it's I actually co-chair that with Carol Gumbart, who is the conservation agent in town here.
Okay.
And basically, what that is we have the various water bodies in town, and we have a fund. We have an amount of money that we use for treating those water bodies. So we get them monitored annually. We have a company come in that will actually survey invasive plant species, and will survey like we keep an eye out for algal blooms, and we'll treat them accordingly. So we actually in the spring we'll go out and we'll treat them, and any time that there's an algal bloom over the course of the year, which fortunately last year there weren't any.
Good. Yeah.
But with the summers becoming hotter and drier, and we're starting to see a greater increase of these algal blooms that are coming up, and we need to treat for them.
Okay. That could be something that we could bring somebody in and talk about that. We could get a show on that too, possibly.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. So, anybody who's using a water body in town is we are monitoring them at this point, and we're making sure that the invasive species populations are being kept in check, with the exception, I should say, of Mill Pond and Graniteville Pond, because they're basically impoundments on Stony Brook, and they're very, very difficult to treat as a result.
Yeah. All right, Seth, good. I'd like to thank you for coming and informing us all about the septics and the Healthy Lakes and Ponds. And
thank you very much for having me.
No problem.
Right.
And I'd like to say thank you. And we'll see you again in the next one.